Well, the Saints finally have a coaching staff. Yesterday, the last piece fell into place, and they can start moving forward now on building this roster and trying to execute the vision of this new offense, which I think we are all excited to see. Welcome to the Saints Insider Podcast. I'm Luke Johnson, filling in as a host for Zach Ewing today, who's off messing around somewhere. Who knows? I'm joined today by columnist Rod Walker, beat writer Matthew Paris, and columnist Jeff Duncan. We are going to talk about this new staff and talk about some of the important things these guys need to do. And next week, Matt and I are going to be in Indianapolis for the Combine, and we're going to talk a little bit about that too, what kind of players the Saints might be looking at. So a lot of stuff on the docket today, fellas. How we doing?
Doing good. Looking forward to talking about this stuff.
I'm eager to hear post-Combine sordid tales of you all being out all night.
Oh, there's none of that up there.
Yeah, I want to hear.
I'll be in bed by 8 p.m.
You
to
want to
get
hear
up by
Matt
9
out
p.m.
at Ike and Jonesy's, dominating the dance floor.
No,
Expect to hear
there's
those
only
stories.
one of us, maybe two of us in this crew who are dominating the dance floor.
Me,
I know you for
me,
one.
Yeah, me and who?
Rod, obviously.
Yeah.
Rod's got way more swagger than the rest of us put together.
You know, he's got
Especially you.
most swagger in the NFL. He's no longer in the NFL. Would shock you all. Wade Phillips. Maybe the best dancer in the NFL.
Great Twitter handle, too. Son
Yeah.
of bum.
Unbelievable dancer.
All right.
That's all I'll say.
Now that we've
I
got
wasn't
that
expecting
covered,
that to be part of the show. But
now that we've got that
He
covered,
can dial
guys,
up
Yeah.
a blitz and is dancing.
now that we have that covered, okay, let's get into the topic du jour. The Saints have a full coaching staff now. We're expecting it to be announced really any day now from the team. But look, they got a lot of stuff they need to do with this staff. Okay, so we'll start it off with the big, broad question. Rod, in your opinion, what is priority number one for this new coaching staff led by offensive coordinator Klint Kubiak?
For me, I would say just to get that running game going. I think that was just such a big problem last year, and obviously that includes the offensive line gelling like it needs to. But yeah, I think if they can get the running game going, I think it makes things so much easier for Derek Carr. So for me, that's priority number one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It is when you look at those offenses from 17 to 20, when they were consistently year in, year out, top 5 in the NFL in scoring, top 5, top 10 in basically every category. Rushing was, I think, top 5 every year. Such a huge part of what they do, a huge part of what any offense does. You build so much off of that running game. Let's go to you guys, though. What do you think?
Yeah, to build on that, I just think zooming out, making Derek Carr being able to continue his progress of what he made at the end of last season. I think they really found some stuff with their play action game. This is an offense that has relied on play action a lot, maybe less so in recent years, but I just think kind of updating it with, pre-snap motion and all that, I think getting Derek Carr back in that groove that he found at the end of the season is going to be really important. And you really need him to take that step this year because he's going to be around. And so I just think they need to sell him a little bit more. And I think this is the perfect hire to do that.
Yeah, look, to Rod's point about the running game, it was one of the first things Dennis Allen said, right, in the postseason was he thinks there's more meat on that bone. They haven't done very well. So you could sense that's a priority. I also think this is the period of time when it's the personnel acquisition period, the procurement of personnel, getting ready for free agency and the draft. So obviously the staff has to start marrying up what they want to do offensively with what personnel they have in the building, and then maybe who they need to bring in to fit some of these roles in this new scheme.
Yeah, and look, I think the way we could boil this down is there are a lot of leaky holes in this offense. You could say the offensive line. You could say the running game. You could say they didn't get enough out of Derek Carr. You could say they didn't get enough out of their tight end group, which I think all of us expected a lot more out of Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau, and we expected to see a little bit more out of Jimmy Graham, other than the 6 targets that he got last year. I think it's fair to say that Chris Olave, probably their best offensive player last year, was inconsistent. There's a lot of ways this can get better. And this is still an offense that finished top 10 in the NFL in scoring last year somehow after that kind of late season surge. So I think there's a lot of different ways it can take this, but I think the good thing is, if you're Dennis Allen and the Saints offense, is really there's nowhere to go but up for this team. But I want to focus specifically on this offensive line. I think PFF had them ranked 23rd in the NFL last year. When you're talking about the running game, Rod, I don't think there's a lot of scenarios where Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller are all averaging less than 3.5 yards per carry, which was the case last year. That entire running back room, which is full of guys who are either have the skins on the wall or they are highly drafted players, explosive players. None of them finished with a 20-yard run last year. So when you're looking at this offensive line, do you think this is something where this new scheme, this new coaching staff can help it out? Do you think they need to inject some new players in it? Is it a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I know we talk about Trevor Penning every week, but I think just his lack of development at that, at his position, just kind of like snowballed everything. He didn't work out, and then it just kind of they kind of found themselves trying to piece it all together after that. And I think if he had played like they thought he would play when they drafted him so high, I think things may have been a little better. But that didn't work out, and they kind of spent the whole season trying to, just kind of piece it all together, and they struggled because of that.
Yeah, look, Penning's kind of forte coming out of Northern Iowa was his run blocking, I mean, we knew there'd be a transition, so that was the one thing we thought he would do is be this road grader. You're right, to the point of this new offensive scheme, a lot relies on play action. Well, you got to be able to run the ball to get to the play action. So, yeah, I think clearly the offensive line needs a major upgrade. I think we all agree that's something that they're probably going to address, right, in this free agency or the draft or both.
Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, I think they got better as the season went on because, those first, I don't know if it was, first 6 games?
7 games after they benched Penning.
Yeah, it was like 17 sacks or whatever it was, like a really high number. But those numbers improved as the season went on, which so we did see some signs of improvement. So they just need to carry that over into this year, I feel like.
Yeah, it's so hard to say, though, just because the end of the year they were playing so many bad teams, too.
Right,
what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's so hard to weigh what happened at the end of the year. We keep talking about that, but a lot of it was against bad teams. Right. So,
yeah, for me, it's a question of what are they going to do at left tackle. I just think they need to get maybe a little bit more athletic there. If they re-sign Andres Pete, I don't think that's a bad option, but he's more of a full-time guard, I think, even as well as he played at left tackle. So for me, I think that's a position you look at the draft, and I do think they need to get a little bit more athletic with this line. I don't think it's terrible, but you ask when we finally get the chance to talk to Klint Kubiak, I'm kind of interested to see his philosophy on linemen and what he looks for at that position, because I think the athleticism piece is going to be kind of the main thing I think that they're going to stress.
And we haven't even mentioned Ryan Ramczyk, who we don't know, if he's going to be, how healthy he's going to be for next season, or if he's coming back, or what he's going to do. So he dealt with the knee injury all season pretty much and just kind of played through it. So we'll have to see what happens with him as well.
We will definitely be hitting on the offensive line when we talk about the combine in a little bit. I do want to say, I think this staff, one of the more impressive things from the outside of it when you're looking at the way it's constructed, they've got 2 coaches on the staff with decades of NFL experience specializing in the offensive line, in John Benton and Rick Dennison. Did I get that name right? Mm-hmm. Okay. I had a momentary blank there. Both of these coaches have spent they spent a long time with Gary Kubiak, Klint Kubiak's father. They have 20-plus years of experience coaching offensive lines in the NFL. I think when you're looking at Penning in particular, look, I don't think you can go into a season just counting on him to be the guy. But when you're looking at him in particular, the deficiencies have been technique related. If you get 2 really well-respected offensive line coaches in the building and you are able to allow Penning to have a full, healthy offseason to work on his technique, maybe go off somewhere, work with some specialists, I think you could see an improved version of that player, and maybe even somebody that you can count on. Yeah, you can't go into it banking on him, but I don't think it's. I think it's way, way, way too early to just give up on the player because of how poorly he played in his limited exposure last season. All that being said, the offensive line needs to be better, because if you're going to have a quarterback functioning at a high level, you need functioning offensive line play. You need high-level offensive line play. Derek Carr. This is a huge season for him. He was underwhelming for big stretches of his debut season in New Orleans. Now they've got a new offensive coordinator coming in, and we heard Dennis Allen speak on NFL media yesterday that part of the reason he wanted to go out and get Klint Kubiak is because, like we said on this podcast before, this is the type of system that is friendly to quarterbacks, and it gets the most out of their abilities, and it makes things a little bit simpler for them. And we've seen it throughout the league with the Shanahan-McVay trees. All these coaches who've come from those trees tend to get the most out of their quarterbacks. So, with that being said, what do you think this new staff and this new potential new scheme means for Derek Carr? What can we hopefully see out of that?
I kind of hit on it, but just building on what he had last season, I'm curious to see whether, some quarterbacks don't like pre-snap motion. Like, I remember when I talked to Logan Paulson a few weeks ago, he was saying how when they were in Atlanta with Matt Ryan, Matt Ryan wasn't a fan of all that movement at first because it kind of there's more to process before the snap, and it actually in some ways puts more responsibility on the quarterbacks. You've kind of heard Aaron Rodgers say similar things, but it makes it a lot easier, I think, afterwards because the defense is confused as well. So I do think there's going to be an adjustment period for Derek Carr, but he's also a pretty smart player. I think we can give him that. And, I just think that sort of stuff, making his life easier, is kind of the main thing I'm looking for with this.
Well, and look, I think any good coach, any good staff, they're going to adjust the scheme to what the players want to do and how they do what they do best. So if he doesn't like motion, there's not going to be a lot of motion. They're not going to force that on him. You want to get the best production and efficiency out of him. So we'll see. Like we've talked before, I don't think motion and play action's the elixir for all offense in the NFL. I mean, there's a lot to that. A lot of quarterbacks like the static approach where they see exactly where the defensive chess pieces are, as opposed to everything moving around, like you said. I know some quarterbacks don't like the motion because of that. So it's all going to depend. I think if they're smart, if they sit down with him and mold this thing around what he likes, what in the old scheme he liked, what he liked from the Raiders scheme, what applies to this new scheme that Kubiak's bringing in, and then come up with some kind of amalgamation that plays to his strengths. Like Drew Brees said, I mean, it all comes down to the quarterback in this league.
I do think, though, that, listening to DA talk yesterday was the main thing was this is going to be that scheme. That's the reason they hired Klint Kubiak, is to at least give this a try. And, if it doesn't work, then maybe they adjust midseason, kind of like they did last year where they started to incorporate more play action. But I do think there's a lot of things built into this offense that can, help Derek over the long haul here. And I think, like you were saying, Luke, it is a very quarterback-friendly system.
I think the fact he's been in the league, this is 11? Yeah. Year 11, I mean, I think he'll be able to – you hope he's able to pick up on it quickly. And if so, I mean, you should see some improvement from his offense. And if not, this team's going to struggle again.
He's had plenty of experience picking up new offensive systems. Lots of offensive coordinators over there with the Raiders. One thing, like I agree with you, Dunk, that I don't think motion is this like panacea that's just going to fix everything, right? But I do think when Derek was at his best last year, I think he was getting rid of the ball quickly, and he was diagnosing and getting the ball out of there. And part of the thing that I think motion can help with is diagnosing stuff pre-snap, where your teams are forced to show their hand a little bit, tip their hand. So you incorporate a little bit more of that in. Maybe that helps him get the ball out of his hands quicker. And I think we saw last year when he was doing that, when he was getting rid of the ball in 2.5 seconds or less, his numbers were way up. So maybe we'll see a little bit of that. I am interested to see if they are able to manufacture anything close to what San Francisco can do in terms of yards after the catch. That's something we didn't see a lot of last year with the Saints offense. Just getting the ball in space and letting them move. I think they have some intriguing players that could do something with that. I think Kendra Miller in space could be very dangerous. I think Rashid Shaheed in space could be very dangerous. Juwan Johnson for a tight end, I think very good with the ball after the catch. Creating that is a whole other problem, and getting Derek to be comfortable throwing across the middle to guys who are open and have room to run is something they're going to have to get him comfortable doing. But I think this offense could look interesting, which is something we haven't really said in the last couple of years. So
I can distinctly remember last year in training camp, Dennis Allen saying that's what they wanted to do, get the ball to their playmakers in space. I remember him saying it because they had that speed. That was the whole key to this offense, was getting it out. So, I mean, this isn't a new concept or anything.
No, it's not. It's not a new concept, but it's getting the scheme to actually
Well,
create
I don't
that.
think that the old scheme ever did not have that. I mean, I don't think that's ever been not part of the offensive scheme they've had. It's a matter of getting it done and executing it and calling it. But I don't think it was ever. I mean, the Saints' old system was one of the most quarterback-friendly systems in the history of the game.
Yes.
I mean, it broke every record in the game. So, I mean, this is not, I don't think, a unquarterback-friendly system. It comes down to the quarterback playing the system. I think if you put Pat Mahomes in that offense, it's a whole different world.
Well, I also
Yeah.
think it's the play caller too. Sorry to
I
jump
agree.
on
That's-
you,
I was
but
gonna-
That's what I'm getting at.
I was gonna bring that up. Yeah,
Whole point.
And nobody's saying that the history of the Saints offense is not. But I think when you remove the genius play caller from that, I mean, we all agree that Pete Carmichael is a smart football coach, an accomplished football coach, but that's still Sean Payton's offense. You drop somebody else into it and expect them to call plays. I know we're talking about the exact same thing here with Klint Kubiak coming in to run some version of Kyle Shanahan's offense, but I think it was clear that the guy pulling the trigger, calling the plays, whatever, just was not able to create the same level of offensive execution that they had before. And I think when you're able to see that, identify it, and then say, okay, like which systems are a little bit more interchangeable, and you don't need necessarily the genius to have some level of high offensive execution. I think that was, to me, why it was important to go get somebody like Klint Kubiak.
I think it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
I don't
for
think
sure.
I don't think the systems are that much different. I think they're very similar. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, something that Dennis also mentioned in that interview was the offense that they're putting in place has evolved kind of the last 10 to 15 years where they do use more motion. But I think that's maybe the difference between, Pete Carmichael and Sean Payton. I think over Sean Payton's tenure, even though I wasn't here, Jeff, you could probably speak to this better, but he evolved as a play caller as he started to incorporate more of that modern stuff to update kind of the system he was working with. And so I just don't know how much the Saints were evolving and adapting to the league last year. And I think Klint Kubiak, for as young as he is, and given his familiarity with this system, I think will help put the Saints in a better position to do that.
Yeah.
And having a first-year quarterback last year, I mean, that didn't help. I mean, you bringing Derek Carr in, who's not familiar with it. So, I mean, I think it was just a combination of all that stuff and that made it go wrong.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I just think I think this system that everybody keeps talking about is not a whole lot different. I think it's going to be very similar to what, and I think, they talked about, Dennis Allen talked about that. He said, basically it's Gary Kubiak's system, which is almost identical to what John Gruden has always run. And now maybe it's evolved over time, but all these offenses have evolved over time. I mean, Andy Reid's offense isn't the same one he was running 15 years ago. So I just think it's going to come down to guys playing well. I think everyone hoping that this scheme is going to be the end-all, be-all, I think is, there still comes down to personnel.
Right. I mean, I looked it up a few weeks ago, and more than half the teams in the league now are connected to this tree, some form or another, whether it's a guy like Brian Callahan spending time under Zach Taylor. Now he brings a lot of different philosophies, but he's in Tennessee. Atlanta hired Zach Robinson, a guy that the Saints looked at. A lot of these teams are trying to replicate this offense because I think they do think it's advantageous. It's just how well can you execute it? How well can you put players in that position?
Well, the definition of insanity, as people like to say, is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So they are going to do something at least a little bit different next year. It's not going to be the same offense that we've seen, or a different version of an updated version, version 16.0 we've seen around here since 06. So let's put a lid on the coaching and the scheme that we're not really going to see until till August anyways. And let's talk about some more pressing stuff. The NFL Combine is next week. This is not going to be the Saints' first opportunity to go see these prospects in person. They were out in force at the Senior Bowl, but this will be their first time with this new coaching staff. And we've already kind of chatted a little bit about how maybe this new staff is going to change the way they evaluate prospects, or not necessarily the way they evaluate them, but the type of player they're looking for. So I'm curious, you guys, what are you really looking out for at the Combine next week? And obviously we're not going to know how the Saints staff is going to want to build this roster, but we're going to get a good idea of who these prospects are, at least from a measurable standpoint. And for the Saints, they're going to get a chance to talk to them. So what are you looking out for?
I think for me, it's kind of going back to what we've been saying, but I think this team's biggest weaknesses are up front on both sides of the ball, and I think that's where they're going to spend most of their time, targeting those guys and trying to find some guys that can help them up front on the offensive line and the defensive line.
So I'm kind of curious about this. I'm sure you guys are probably going to talk about this too, but we've seen them kind of stick to the same mold year in, year out. They draft these big, long, twitchy guys. Not all of them panned out. Marcus Davenport, big, long, twitchy, didn't pan out. Peyton Turner, big, long, twitchy, has not panned out. Trevor Penning, big, long, twitchy, has not panned out. Some of them have, though. Trey Hendrickson was kind of in that mold. He panned out. A couple others have. So I'm curious, do you think that they stick with what they've been doing and try to kind of go back to the same well, or do you think maybe you could see a little bit of a change up from them?
I think after the last few years, I think you may see a little bit of a change up, but I do think they're still going to target those guys. But if they see somebody who's close to that prototype but not exactly what it normally is, I think they may be willing to roll the dice now. But we'll see. That's going to be an interesting thing to see about this new coaching staff, especially on the offensive guys.
Yeah.
I think on the defensive side, it'll probably be closer to what they have done, given that there's continuity in place there. Dennis is still in charge, and he likes the guys that he likes. But, they did talk a little bit more about being more open to those, I think, situational pass rushers, kind of like the Zach Bonds, those smaller kind of guys. Like maybe they use a later round pick to take a flyer. But I think if they're going to target a pass rusher in the first round, it's probably still going to be to those prototypes. But I think the offensive line is a lot more of an interesting question. I think that's kind of where you get into Klint Kubiak's taste, John Benton's, Rick Dennison. What do they look for? How are they leaning on those guys? Because I think they'll definitely have a say in this process, and that's already started.
The other thing I want to follow, and you guys are going to be there, is the other side of the combine is all the deal making that's going on, preparing for the start of the league year, free agency, and this is when news starts to come out, right? It all starts to leak out because the agents are all there. They're meeting with decision makers across the NFL, and so this is when we'll start seeing the stories leak out about who might be on the trade block, who might be renegotiating their deals. That's always when, to me, the league kind of starts the new year, when all that news starts leaking out. So there's really two things going on at the Combine. There's the draft prep, obviously testing all that stuff, and then there's the other part of it, which is preparing for free agency.
Which is the part that we're going to try to chase down.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Always fun, yeah. But it's like you're burning the midnight oil, you're burning the candle at both ends, right? Because you're up for the day stuff, and then you got to be out all night because that's where the deals are being made.
The NFL Combine brought to you by Miller Lite.
But Luke's going to bed at 8 o'clock, so
yeah, that's to get up at 10 and go back out, get a couple winks. I think that part's really interesting, Jeff, because we've seen in the past the Saints send everybody up there.
Yep,
they send Kai Harley up there. Kai Harley has taken on a much larger role over the course of his tenure here in the player procurement side, and he's kind of built his little toolbox up. But a big part of what Kai Harley is going to be doing up there is backroom meetings with agents, other executives, see how things might fit together. They'll have, I'm guessing, Michael Parrington, their director of pro personnel, will be up there.
Jeff Ireland.
Jeff Ireland will definitely be up there. All their coaches will be up there. I mean, they send everybody. So I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're going to figure out next week, one way or another, about kind of what direction this team wants to take. Yeah, I think when we're talking about the combine from the draft side of things, I think we can all agree that offensive, defensive lines are areas where this team wants to address this offseason. Curious if there's any other kind of position groups that you guys are going to maybe try to keep an eye on or think might be a good thing for the Saints to fortify this offseason.
Well, I think, look, if we're talking first round of draft, I mean, I think the team could still use a stud receiver. That's my opinion. I mean, I think Chris Olave's a terrific player, but if if Malik Neighbors were there, I think he would be a no-brainer to go get, or a playmaker like Brock Bowers. I think they could use an explosive offensive playmaker, whatever that is. They need some explosiveness, whether they get it from the scheme or not. I think they could use that. So to me, that'd be exciting to watch because this looks like a pretty good draft for that skill set. And then I also think they've got to start thinking long term about safety because of both players are older. I know Jordan Howard is a player they like, but I think that's a position that's kind of sneaky overlooked a little bit.
For me, I was going to say receiver first too. I just think they kind of need another guy, but maybe they try to find that in free agency. But I still think they need to. I don't think we talk about linebacker a lot, but I mean, DeMario's getting older, and I mean, eventually that position. I mean, it's just kind of they seem kind of thin right there for me, and I just think that's a position that they may want to look at. Maybe not in the first round, but I mean, you get somebody, later on in the draft.
And Pete Werner is going into the last year of his contract too.
And, there was a time, and I was the biggest proponent of this. There was a time when linebacker was kind of being almost de-emphasized in the league. Now we're seeing it's going the opposite way. There's a real need for elite, speedy linebackers, athletic linebackers. And that does go to what you were talking about, Matt. I think Jeff Ireland even alluded to some of that at the Senior Bowl, right? That they may be looking at different prototypes than they have in the past. In the past, they wouldn't draft a guy like Patrick Queen because he was undersized. They may look at a guy like that now because of his kind of unique skill set.
Yeah. I think the thing we haven't mentioned, too, is cornerback. If they decide to trade Marshawn Lattimore, Isaac Adams, a free agent, maybe he played well enough to earn a contract with somewhere else that they can't afford him. Rookie cornerback is a way to get someone there. I mean, I don't think at the first round or anything, but I'm just really interested to see what happens with Lattimore this offseason. And depending on what happens there, if a trade happens before the draft, then you would obviously look for his replacement, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it makes perfect sense. And you can plug and play cornerbacks right away. Those are guys don't take a lot of transition.
And I'm with you on safety, by the way. Tyrann Mathieu getting up there. Marcus May has been a disappointment since he signed his contract here, and frankly, it just wouldn't be a surprise to me to see the Saints cut bait on that contract this year. They can get out of it without this huge financial penalty. And even if they keep Marcus May, the injury history there, I think, and the fact that they've run a lot of 3 safety looks defensively in the last couple of years, I think just makes that position a little bit more important, even if it's somebody who's not going to come in and step in right away as a starter. I do want to say a couple names that I'm keeping an eye out this week for this week. Georgia offensive tackle Amarius Mims, I think is potentially in play at number 14. He's a guy that doesn't have like a ton of experience, but he's like a super athlete for that position. Somebody with a lot of upside. Maybe people don't want to hear that, but since the big upside offensive linemen haven't always panned out for the Saints, but I think he's somebody I would keep an eye on. Same sort of vein. I'm hoping I don't butcher this name. BYU tackle Kingsley Suamataia.
Pretty good.
Suamataia. So those two are the guys I'm looking at. I think there's another offensive tackle from Houston who's another potential like big-bodied athlete, guy who's played a lot of football. Maybe Saints fans don't want to hear about a first-round draft pick from Houston, but that's another guy I'm looking at. And then defensively, the edge guys, I think Dallas Turner from Alabama is somebody who could be in play at number 14 if they want to add somebody who's maybe like a sub-rush defensive end guy, not count on him to be a first, second down guy. But I think from a pass rush standpoint, he's probably one of the best in this draft. Same thing goes for UCLA defensive end. Laiatu Latu. Yeah. God, why did I pick these names? And the one I've been feel like I've been looking out for since he absolutely wrecked shop against LSU in week 1 is Jared Verse, the Florida State defensive end.
What about that guy from Missouri? Isn't he like a rising edge rusher, or am I thinking of some?
Zach Ewing?
No, they're not like a guy
need
that
Zach for that.
balled out at the Senior Bowl from Missouri that everybody was talking about, defensive lineman. But I don't know if he would be mid-first round
Well, look,
prospect.
they do have a second round pick. Not their own, but they do own Denver's second round pick. And I think we've seen this team actually do some of its best work in the mid rounds, and it looks like they're going to get, I think, 3 compensatory picks this year, which we'll know obviously before the draft. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of guys to look out for beyond the first round guys, but maybe one of these 5 guys is going to be there at number 14, and I'm gonna look right after calling Brian Brzee last year too.
And look, don't you think we're going to start to? You alluded to it. The direction of the team will start to shape, because we're going to start hearing about what their interest level is and bringing back some of these veteran guys we've talked about for a while now. Are they going to restructure them? Are they going to move on from them? I think we're going to start to see some of that develop, the future of this team next week.
I think from the combine too, the draft order isn't set at the combine, but I think the interesting thing about the Saints being at number 14 is how does the draft shake out in front of them? Is there going to be a run of tackles to where the best defensive player is still on the board, or are they all going to be skill position players in front, giving them that stud left tackle? I just think, there's a lot riding for these guys at the combine, and I think, if you look at the drills and stuff, it kind of starts there and building that stock and how they do in interviews and all that.
And if the Saints are still using their kind of tried formula here, for those listening, make sure you're following at MathBomb on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. Kent Lee Platt, he does the relative athletic score, and that's been a pretty solid predictor of the Saints draft classes in recent years. Look for guys 9.5 and up, and you're probably on the Saints radar. All right. I think that's enough combine talk. We'll be back next week on Monday before Matt and I fly out to Indianapolis for the combine to get a little bit more preview done in there. Maybe talk about the finally officially released Saints offensive coaching staff. And until then, you can follow all of our work over at NOLA.com. I got Rod Walker again here to my right. I'm Luke Johnson. There's Matthew Paris and Jeff Duncan, and we've got Norman Bell running the scene behind the show over there. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.